Welcome to episode 142. And if you have ever promoted a brilliant team member into a management role and then discovered that they were a dreadful manager, then this episode's for you. Because one of the reasons why that happens is because we often give people the title of manager, but don't actually give them any skills or support or instruction or training on how to manage people. And that's often because it's time consuming, it can be seen as expensive. So, in today's episode, I'm actually just going to give you a really simple plan to get your new manager confident in that role so that by the end of this episode, you can have a week by week plan for the first 30 days that they're in that role, including what their meeting agendas look like, some quick training modules you or your HR partner can run. And then I'll also explain just how you can extend that into a 90-day program, which is still light touch, but they are moving from doing the work and being that brilliant team member to actually leading the work. So let's get into what does a 30-day new manager sprint look like? So week one, so 0 to 1, this is just setting the foundations. And really our goal here is that we want to give clarity about what does management look like? What is good in our business? And the easiest way to do that is the first step is to share a simple leadership charter. And I've talked about this in previous episodes. This is about just creating a one-page document that describes what is leadership around here? How do we show up? What are our values, our behaviors that we expect? What are the management basics that are non-negotiable? Things like having regular one-on-ones or addressing issues early or demonstrating the values every day and communicating clearly with our team. And once we have that leadership charter, that's a 60, 90-minute conversation where we take the new manager through that and enable them to ask questions, but also for you to provide stories that bring the leadership charter to life. So there's no point in having a leadership charter, it's just a document that's emailed. We need to actually explain and give examples on how we're using it and why it's important. Okay, step 2 is defining the role and the outcomes. So we want a role description. I don't mind what you want to call it, a success document, a role description, position description. Everyone calls it something else. It doesn't matter. As long as it says, this is what you're responsible for, and this is how success will be measured in the next 3 to 6 months. So think about what are the results, what are the people, what are the processes that this role is responsible for. And keep it really specific, really short. Position descriptions should not be a laundry list of tasks. You want maybe a paragraph of context, and then you want to get into what are you actually responsible for. Here are your no more than 8. Usually we say 3 to 5, some roles 5 to 8, clear objectives that you need to achieve. And this is how we're going to measure that. Step 3, we're covering just the business essentials. So walk through what is the culture that you're trying to build. What's your expectations around decision making with this role? Who decides what? Where do they have room to move and to make those decisions? What things do you have as your non-negotiables that they just cannot make decisions around? For example, safety, behavior, communication standards, compliance with policies. They should be non-negotiables. But there'll be a whole bunch of other things within their role, their responsibility that they should be able to make the decisions around. And if you have a new manager checklist, then sit beside them, walk through it so they can see what is expected across those employment basics, meetings, performance, compliance, conflict, budget, time management, relationships, well-being. And that can help people as well to understand the difference. And there's a huge difference between being a great team member and being a great manager. And the way that we can do this is by really just explaining to them, your job is to build the team to get the results and to get the results in a way that increases your people's well-being and makes them want to stay. And that's not easy. And the way that we do that is through this leadership charter and by having really great habits from day one. And one of those really great habits is to meet with your team members regularly and listen. And the second is to address any issues early and kindly and offer to practice with them doing that over the next month because it's a skill that needs to be developed. So, your deliverable by the end of week one is having a written summary from the new manager and just saying, look, just answer me three questions. One, in your words, what does good leadership look like? Second, what are the three outcomes you want to own in the next quarter? And third, what decisions do you feel are yours to make? What are you still unsure about? What do you need to escalate? Because if you can just get them just to write that out and discuss with you, then that just makes sure from, week one, you are on the same page. So week two is about observation and learning. So we want them to be able to understand the team, the work, your customers. So they should be shadowing and listening. So ask your manager to sit in on key workflows or customer moments, join team meetings and customer calls and handovers. Meet every team member one-on-one and ask them about their role, their strengths, their challenges, their barriers, and really introducing those people basics in short bursts. So things like, how do I approve leave? Should I approve leave? Just those really small things that when you've been a manager for a long time, you forget that there was a first time that you did that and you didn't know what to do. Okay. So you can have like just 30-minute sessions. One might be how to run a one-on-one effectively. The second might be how to give feedback that's positive and constructive. And the third might be how to escalate issues or when you should ask for help. And as part of that, you want to make sure you have one-on-one templates for your new manager. Unfortunately, I've seen this many times where someone says to the new manager, you need to make sure you're doing one-on-ones. And they say, oh, I'm absolutely doing one-on-ones. And then 6 months later, there's this huge divide between what their team members know and what they should know. And that's because the one-on-ones just become work in progress. So we want to make sure that we do have a template for that one-on-one, starting with a genuine check-in. How are you? And asking just simple questions, things like, what's been your biggest win? What's getting in your way right now? What goals are you really excited about? What are your priorities for this week? What do you need from me? Just having questions that they can use and learn how to listen to the answers is really important. So the next thing is obviously you also need to be giving them feedback so they see what that's good look like. So, when you were in that customer meeting, here's what I noticed. Or, I was really confident when I saw you do blah. So it's just making sure that you're giving them feedback as well. So by the end of week two, you should be giving them a little summary. What have you seen working really well? What do you think's got some improvement to happen? And ask them, are they seeing anything that they're unsure about in the standards or the processes? So week three, we really want to get them from, shadowing and watching to really leading. So we want to give them those meeting rates. We want to ask them to run the next team meeting, to do those regular one-on-ones. We want them to sit quietly and give feedback and give them a team meeting agenda that they can use. And again, really simple stuff, but just if you have consistency with this, it's going to save you so many problems down the track. Inconsistency is one of the biggest issues when it comes to culture in organizations. So having a couple of dot points on a team agenda, quick wins, positive news, what have you got to give me this week? Here's the update on our team goals, here's our key numbers, here's a great customer story. What are the blockers? What do we need from each other? And what are our actions? And we also want to start thinking about having our managers practice difficult conversations. And, we can just do like 20-minute role plays on different scenarios. So one might be around underperformance, another might be around behavior or attitude concerns. Another could be if an employee starts pushing back on requests. So just being able to practice that, whether it's with you as their manager or with your HR partner, really gets them set up and confident and more likely to address issues rather than just letting them go and fester. So, make sure that you also have one-on-ones with them. So, it could be fortnightly and then just debriefing on whatever the tricky conversations they've had, going back, talking about that leadership charter, and again, giving them examples of what you've seen working really well. So by the end of that week 3, you should have 2 or 3 team priorities that they're proposing that need to happen and that you agree on, and you want to keep them small and achievable. So week 4, we want them to own the outcomes, get set up for the next 60 days. So this is where they're stepping into ownership. So setting goals and getting clarity and accountability. So you want them to have maybe 3 or 4 goals for the next quarter. Each goal needs a measure. It needs who's owning it. Is it them? Is it a member of the team? And what's the check-in rhythm on that? And, it might be at this point that you start talking about the idea of situational leadership and get them to start thinking about how to flex their leadership style to each person and each task. It might be starting to understand their comfort with delegation, and do they need to start learning a little bit more about how to delegate effectively and why we delegate. So it might be, asking the manager, tell me, like, how would you rate yourself on your management skills in terms of your comfort level? So not your skill level, because it's hard for people to say, I'm terrible at this, but what's your comfort level with giving feedback? What's your comfort level with having those difficult conversations? What do we need to focus on so that you can have that as your deliverable by the end of week 4 to go, okay, this is the manager's development plan over the next 1 to 3 months. So that's our 30-day sprint. Now, we want to get momentum, so we want to keep it going without overcomplicating it. So days 30 to 60 might be around communication and confidence. So focusing on running those effective one-on-ones at team meetings. There is nothing a manager can do that makes more of an impact than doing these effectively. And that means active listening, having those difficult conversations where we need them. So making sure that that's a focus. And then it could be from days 60 to 90 is really deepening in that ownership and results. So really getting into goal setting, accountability, delegation. These are fantastic skills to have really early on in your management role. And we want them to start identifying the next improvement area. So again, maybe you go back to your leadership charter and say, okay, rate your comfort level on these. Where do we need to focus for the next 3 to 6 months after this? What monthly learning topics do we need to look at? Do we need a mentor? Do we need some short leadership training? And just keeping that rhythm focused on leadership growth and not just the job that they're doing. And let's not forget informal learning, things like podcasts, reading articles, webinars. I think that everyone should be encouraged to learn at least one thing a month. And the best way to know if that's happening is to ask them. So you're a manager, so part of our leadership charter is continual learning. So for this month, what are you going to do? Okay, I'm going to listen to this podcast. Okay, at the end of the month, guess what you're going to do? How was the podcast? What did you learn? What can you apply? And hey, how could I use that as well? That's how we learn. So the next thing is just with that 90 days is to consider a skip level meeting. So this is where the manager meets with the team to get direct feedback and just to check in. How are things going? It's a light way to lift management quality without heavy programs, without having complaints coming through, enabling things to fester. And it gives that manager's manager often really great information just on what's happening on the ground as well. And it makes the employees feel really good and valued and increases involvement and belonging in the organisation. So, the thing to think about is how do you get your leadership charter in place? How do you get your new manager checklist to guide that coaching and spot gaps early? Because things like those employment basics, leave types, entitlements, probation reviews, super important. as is effective team management, one-on-ones, quarterly check-ins, performance standards. And then we've got our leadership skills. So running effective meetings, communicating clearly, presenting ideas, resolving conflict. And then we've got the actual job, the things like budget awareness, compliance, the actual accountability of things that we need. And of course, we want to make sure that our managers are always personally developing. Now, what happens if you do all of this and your new manager is still struggling? And sometimes that's because they hesitate. They may be worried about being too directive, especially if they were former colleagues that they're now managing, which means they may avoid feedback because they want to be liked. So the way that we do that is to just normalize it, let them know that new managers will almost always feel awkward, that growth can feel really uncomfortable, and rehearse. So those, little role plays, although they might feel awkward, they really do make a big difference. And the other thing is to really talk about your values. So yes, you're achieving what you need to achieve is really important. We need you to hit those goals, but you need to do it in the right way. So to make sure that company values stay at the top. And then thinking about, how do we make sure that we're keeping in contact as well? So what's our own check-in cycle as manager to top level manager? And you can use your new manager checklist to make sure that you are doing those things in your coaching to that. So just having a think about what are those tools that you need. So you need the leadership charter. You should have a leadership charter. You should have a new manager checklist. You should have a one-on-one agenda and a team meeting agenda. And then the other thing that you can do is just give them some lines that they can use when they get stuck, So it could be if they're not sure how to address a performance issue with someone, then just starting with those open questions, can I share something with you that I think will help? Or, the impact of X is Y. What support do you need from me? These are just simple sentences that the more that a manager can learn to use them, then the more likely they are to be comfortable in those uncomfortable situations. So you do not need a complicated program for new managers, but you do need a process that creates clarity, builds confidence, and develops the right habits. And we need to start that from week one. So, week one, foundations. Week two is observation and learning. Week three is then leading the room. And week four is owning the outcomes. And then we're extending it out to our 90-day plan. And then we're keeping our new manager focus using our checklist so that they know this is how we need to manage here. So if you would like to have something like this package for your business with templates and a short manager workshop, you can book a free strategy session with us at Amplify HR, and we can map your 30-day plan and the first quarter roadmap. And there's a link to how to do that in the show notes. And if you've received value from this episode, I would love it if you could leave a rating or a review at Apple Podcasts or Spotify so someone else can also find these episodes to help with their business. Episodes are released on Monday, so click subscribe and you'll be notified of when that's available. Thanks so much for joining me. If you have any questions, comments, or ideas for future episodes, head on over to the website amplifyhr.com.au or connect with me on LinkedIn and we can start a conversation.